Good morning, everybody. I'm going to give us a few minutes for people to pop on. In the meantime, I'm going to take care of a little bit of housekeeping. Those of you who don't know me, my name is Bonnie Nightingale. I'm the Stewardship Coordinator here at Saratoga Plan. We also have Alex on the phone with us today. She's actually under the name of Maria, but she's going to be in the background pulling the strings and making all this happen as we share screens and adapt to this new way of getting together. So bear with us if we have some hiccups, and this is our first time doing an online event like this. So bear with us, and we're excited to be here. Hey, Skip. A couple of quick notes before we get started. We are going to record this, and hopefully the video quality will be good enough that we can share it on some of our other platforms as well, so those who weren't able to join today can view it later. And then while we're going, if you can mute your audio and keep your video off while Skip's presenting, that'll be great. And then as you have questions, as Skip's going along, as questions pop up, please go ahead and type those into the chat box, and we're going to try to address all of those that we can after the presentation. But keep them coming throughout. We love the questions, whether they're about Skip and his experience, whether it's about Plan or the project that we just finished over at Galway. Regardless, keep those questions coming. I'm just checking notes, bear with me here. As far as our fundraiser goes, we wanted to say thank you to everybody who's been able to pitch in with that. We've been raising money to pay for the work that Skip just did at the Galway Preserve. We are halfway, or no, a little farther than halfway to our goal. So thank you everyone who is able to contribute. We're hoping that this adds a little clarity to that project and gives a little inspiration for it as well. And so afterwards, maybe you can share what you've learned with somebody else. So looks like people are popping on. We'll get going. I want to introduce Skip, who is a wildlife biologist and has spent a good portion of his life studying wetlands. He comes to us from Vermont, and he's been doing this for a really long time. He built his first beaver baffle as an early teen on his family's property. Used his father's old garden fence, I think, to build a baffle around a culvert when the beavers returned to their family property. And for the last 25 years, he's been doing it professionally, and really been able to help improve wildlife habitat as he goes. And he has a wealth of knowledge he's going to share with us today. We're excited to have you, Skip. Welcome. Can't wait to see what you're going to show us.
Okay. You want me to start?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. And I have about 35 slides I want to share with you to get us started. And this is the first time that I've done this. So there may be a few hiccups, as Bonnie said. But my daughter Emma's here to help me if I have any problems. Right, Emma? So I gotta view the slideshow, Emma. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, view slideshow. There we go. Hopefully, you guys are seeing that. And just so there's no confusion as to what species we're talking about, I thought I'd start with a picture of a beaver waving to everybody. And I want to begin with just a little context. I don't know what level of appreciation for wetlands everybody has out there, but I do this work because they are so incredibly valuable, and beavers create, maintain, and improve them, they're phenomenally rich habitats and just incredibly valuable. And so the thing about conflicts with humans is that there's only two ways to effectively protect the threatened property. To kill the beavers, all the beavers, to extirpate them permanently from every conflict point, or in a general vicinity around every conflict point, or to use non-lethal strategies, usually to sneak water away from them, because damming is the biggest conflict issue with beavers. And within that category, the road culvert is really the biggest problem point. We'll be talking about the other type, as I've categorized it, at Galway, which is a quote unquote regular beaver dam. And they're a little bit less of a problem, but can also threaten properties. So the fur, common sense teaches us, but also the fur trade taught us, if we didn't need that when you remove beaver dams from an area, the beaver dams don't persist in their absence. They decay rather quickly, and all the wetlands drain, and ultimately they become forested. For the hundreds of years during the fur trade, when beavers were absent from much of the continent, all these wetlands essentially winked out. They're very, very rich open marshes, essentially. They're not forested, but they winked out during the fur trade centuries as the trees, as they dried out and the forest took over those rich habitats, which is why you see stumps and standing dead timber frequently today in beaver flowages, as I call them. So I just want to continue with some pictures just to emphasize just how incredibly important these places are, and how important it is to build flow devices, which is the general term I use. My products are called Beaver Deceivers. How important it is to implement these strategies, so you can protect these habitats for thousands of other species, and for humans, for the beauty that they bring us, and the amount of life they create for people who are interested in consumptive use of wildlife or non-consumptive use. And they're just full of movement and waves and songs, particularly this time of year, and they will revive your spirit. They just pulse with life, and everything's relative. So relative to the uplands and perhaps mountaintops, they just are so densely occupied by wildlife. It's amazing. And this is not in a beaver flowage, but it's a yellow warbler beside a beaver flowage. So what you also get with beaver habitats is another category of habitat, which I call the early successional habitats, essentially shrubby habitats around the edges of wetlands that are important habitats for a whole range of species like this one. And cedar waxwings. There's so many species that you might not think of as wetland species, but almost everything uses wetlands. Of course, so we all know mallards, they're everywhere. But just look at the structure of that habitat and the amazing diversity of it. And another thing that makes wetlands really, really important is that they're terribly rare. Even before humans, we may have eliminated 75 or 80% of them on this continent. But even before then, they were rare because, particularly in rolling topography like we have across the Northeast, this is really a huge beaver flowage in southern Vermont, looking west towards New York. But you'll see there'll never be a beaver flowage on any of the anywhere else. It's beaver damming habitat is defined as low gradient areas on small streams. And so you just will not ever see it on hillsides. So they're restricted to a very small percentage of the landscape, only a couple percent. And that'll vary, somewhat depending on topography. So beavers aren't going to overrun the landscape, no matter what their populations are. But the rarity of wetlands in places where beavers can dam, again, makes them very, very valuable. It's another scene in southern Vermont, and you'll see right in the middle there's a little tiny basin on that mountainside, and that's a tiny beaver habitat, and that's all there ever be in that area. But another thing, that has been problematic. The war on wetlands, really began with the fur trade and the draining of all those beaver floges, but it's really ongoing. It's particularly with agriculture, wetlands are often considered wastelands, and I think that feeling is still really widespread. And so we've been draining them. We still are. As I mentioned earlier, these dams are made of sticks and mud, so they decay quickly in the absence of beavers. But in the presence of beavers, because beavers dam at the water line and pools of water are level, then beaver dams are perfectly level. But as soon as you remove the beavers, the dam will start to become unlevel, and then you get a high flow event. It'll cut through one of the low places, and the wetland will disappear quickly. And this is another interesting thing about beavers is the places they dam are dictated by physics. Therefore, they dam in the exact same places today as they dammed for 10,000 years. If you're in the North Country, between the retreat of the glaciers and the beginning of the fur trade, around 1600. So as they've recovered in recent decades, they're restoring that ancient landscape. It's about the only part of the landscape that's going to be returned to its ancient form. But in the process, they're drowning all these trees. And so here's a beaver float that was reoccupied quite a while ago, maybe in 1950, for example, and all the standing trees have fallen over. You just see the stumps. And this war on wetlands continues today. This is a very common scene. This is an ancient beaver habitat, which can never be reoccupied unless the landowners decide to stop mowing it. But we're rather obsessed with mowing, us moderns, for some reason. But there's tons of opportunities like this, even in the wet, rich Northeast. Enormous opportunities to restore wetlands by using beavers, who of course do all the work for free. This is a farm nearby in Vermont that I'm sure was created by thousands of years of beaver occupation. You'll see sites like this around the landscape that are very flat and very rich, with a small stream running through them. But it's a gentleman farm. It's not needed for anything agricultural, really, and it would be a great opportunity for wetland restoration if you just stop killing the beavers and again stop mowing. So this is also very inefficient, killing beavers as a way to solve these problems. It's a guarantee that the problem will never go away, because culverts are beaver magnets. Beavers search the landscape for really good damming sites, and there's never been a better, more favorable damming site than a road culvert, because the majority of the dam is already in place in the form of the roadway. So this is a scene that happens all the time, to the tune of millions of dollars a year through society. And if you just kill the beavers and go away and leave a naked culvert, you're going to be coming back soon with heavy equipment and cleaning it out again over and over and over again and repairing road damage. And this is where I start to talk about beaver deceivers, and this is an alternative. I'll just note that the beaver deceiver pictures I'm going to show you here, almost all of them, you can't always see it, but the road culvert is at the bottom of the picture. And so it's just essentially a two-part system. You have to have an initial fence around the culvert to prevent beavers from directly damming it, but then you have to have a pipe system to essentially sneak the water away from the beavers and thereby control damming behavior, and while allowing them, like in this case, to remain in the ecosystem and to create a magnificent wetland just upstream. And I've chosen these pictures. Not every site is like this, but the opportunities are everywhere. Or the threat that if you do kill the beavers, nearby wetlands, like here, you see as a big, beautiful wetland just upstream that's dependent on the beavers. And if you do opt for a lethal strategy, ultimately that wetland is going to drain. And here's another site. This one's in Maine. Huge, beautiful wetland. You can see the beaver dam just above the Beaver Deceiver that supports that whole wetland. And these are the square things on the end of the pipes I generically call filters. I've specifically named them square fence filters, because I'm trying to filter beavers out and filter water in, essentially sneak it in around the perimeter of the filter and into the pipe, and then through the what I call a receiver fence, because it receives the pipe system on the culvert and away from the beavers. And beavers, they don't think like humans do. They do very little deductive reasoning. So they do not step back and see the big picture. They're mostly just responding to environmental stimuli, like the feel of moving water and the feel of a leak, essentially, or the sound of it, or the look of it. And so if you can eliminate those stimuli, they don't know that the water is going through those hollow pipes, something they've never experienced in their evolutionary history. Here's a place where I've raised the pipe a bit, because I'm trying to create this roadside wetland. But it's interesting to note that straight line there you see to the right of the pipe system, and you see that everywhere. This is rural upstate New York, but you see signs of this dredging and draining of wetlands everywhere. So even after the beavers were eliminated by the fur trade, we still went to great efforts to dry all of the wetlands out even more. And so now it's a great opportunity. You just stop killing beavers and we can restore all that damage we've done. These are really spectacular places. This is a similar to Galway, where this is a quote unquote regular beaver dam with a pipe system going through it. And another site with an upstream beaver dam. No wetlands there if you have to kill the beavers to protect this culvert. And this is a site, when I began work, it was at the Penobscot Indian Nation in 1995, and they have just magnificent land in northern Maine, and it's very flat north of Bangor. And this is one of their road culverts, and it's some of the biggest beaver flowages I've ever seen. And so there's a lot of potential loss here if you can't protect these culverts non-lethally. And here's that site, and you can see those little lines across the water are beaver dams, and the big wetland at the bottom of the picture is about 60 or 70 acres. It's enormous. And so the beavers were coming from that big wetland all the way down to the road culvert and clogging it. And so you can see the amount of loss that would have taken place if we weren't able to protect those culverts the way we did. And this brings us to Marlborough, Vermont. You know, beavers have tremendous value in wetlands, even if they're not able to create dams. And in this case, the beaver, this is a beaver that showed up here. It was there for about one beaver for about 1 month. That was it. And then it moved on to a place that had better potential as a overwintering site. But in the meantime, it built this little lodge, and you can see how sticky it is, all the sticks sticking out. And this is an interesting wetland because there wasn't any standing dead timber in it, and there weren't any perches. And so this is an incredibly important microhabitat for all kinds of birds to perch on, including tree swallows and redwing and a robin and a kingbird with a dragonfly in its mouth. And then the next spring I came back and a goose was nesting on it. So that's one beaver, 1 month, a massive amount of ecological value just in that little lodge. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is Galway, the south end of the Galway wetland where we just worked. And when the beavers dam the north end, it threatens that town road. It damages the farm field, and it annoys, if not damages, a little bit of the property of the homeowners to the right. So, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars of threatened property right there, and that you just can't have that. And so, in this case, with this wonderful employee of the Saratoga plan by the name of Bonnie Nightingale, we put in a Beaver Deceiver, and she's a tremendous asset for the plan and for the community, and a great worker. And so this is a very difficult site. We had to carry the supplies a long ways in, and it was a very long pipe system, just because of the nature of the site and the topography. So as she will attest, it was hard work. And maybe at this time, those guys, the plan, Alex from the plan took a bunch of really good pictures, and maybe this would be a good time for those to be shown of the construction process.
So I'm just going to jump in really quick here. Skip, by any means, go ahead and jump in too if you'd like. This picture that we're seeing right here, we already passed one, and we can maybe go back to that later. But this picture was taken last fall, and this is right next to the outlet stream where we put in the Beaver Deceiver, and you can see where this curve, I don't know if folks can see my mouse or not, but this whole curve here is all trail, and water is just flooding over that. And in addition, it was flooding other sections of the trail. Anybody who's been there and sat at that bench knows that the water never came that far before, and this is where water was being let off of that dam to relieve a little bit of the pressure as early as last fall. This was, I want to say, right at the beginning of Skip and my work. So the first day that we realized that we were starting to have some significant pressure on Crane Road at the other end of the pond. And this is the work that they had done since last fall. That dam wasn't there at all last fall. So this was right at the beginning of last month. And each day I'd go down and relieve a little bit of pressure, open up that dam and relieve a little bit of pressure while we waited for Skip to be able to come in and do the work with us. In the meantime, because, you know, Skip mentioned we had fields flooding, crop fields were being flooded, the road, there was significant pressure on the road, and there was beginning to be erosion at the road. And another property had water encroaching on her well and her electric. So to bring the water down to a manageable level while we were getting all that rain, we'd open it up every day. And every day they'd put it back overnight. It's an incredible amount of water coming off that. Here we go, Skip. Maybe you can jump in here. This is day of.
Okay, yeah. Well, this is building a square fence filter, which I've developed every detail of all the flow devices I've used over the decades. But I really like it's a very simple wooden frame, and then you staple this green epoxy coated fencing onto it. The water is very acidic, so it dissolves raw steel quickly, which is, we want these things to last, I hope, 40 years or more. It's hard to say what component will go first, but that's the goal. And so you can see we also sprayed the spot welds. They're black, and the factory doesn't get those very well, so we spray every one of those individually with epoxy. The wood will be underwater, and so when that's underwater, it'll be underwater most of the time. There'll be some fluctuations here. It doesn't decay when it's underwater, so I don't worry about that. And this is it upside down. We're kind of floating it out into place using the wooden infrastructure as our flotation. And then once we get it in place, we roll it over. But we felt that there was a certainty that the Beavers would build the new dam. I think they had already started just below this old dam if we ended the pipe right in the dam. So we ran it downstream quite a ways. So this is an extraordinarily long pipe system. The plywood on top is what I call a whirlpool break. When you have a pressure differential, high flows, in other words, a whirlpool will develop at the upstream end of the pipe, and that's just screaming to the beavers, leak and dam here. And so you don't want that to ever reach the surface and make a sucking sound. And in addition, so that's just a piece of plywood acting as a whirlpool break. But it has another advantage too, because it's a roof, because this is just underwater, so it's very easy for the beavers to come along and drop mud on top of it. And so that prevents the filter from filling up with sedimentation. I think the water was fairly cold, wasn't it? As I recall, Bonnie?
I recall it being fairly cold also, yeah.
Yeah.
So this picture, go ahead, Skip.
No, you go.
All right, I just want to point out, it's really hard to see, but this is actually finished product. And Skip made this one so that it sunk down underneath the water. And the tube, you can almost see right in the center of the picture, the tube heading out from the creek. And then the cage is completely submerged and sitting down into the sediment. So it maintains that aesthetic attributes of the pond there. And then over time, they've begun to dam over the other end of the tubing that sticks out. And you can see here, this is just from the other day. They have done an incredible amount of work, because when you and I left this, Skip, there was still a large hole in the mud and sticks next to the tube, probably about 2 feet wide by maybe 2 or 3 feet long. And over the course of a couple weeks, they've completely filled it in.
This is a pretty small watershed, so this is a 12-inch diameter pipe. It should do the job most of the time. There will be high flows when it's the water will come back up temporarily to the top of the old dam, but it'll draw it back down again. And what I've learned year after year after year doing this work is that I'm not making them big enough. I'm not making them robust enough. It's amazing. A lot of people who aren't familiar with it may take a look and say, geez, that's overbuilt. But I assure you, it is not overbuilt. And I told Bonnie that if the beavers it doesn't make any difference what they do here, anywhere along that pipe. But if they start to focus, they start to sense a leak up at that filter, then that's when you have to be concerned. That's what you have to keep an eye out for. And that's a big filter. That's 12 feet long by 5 feet wide and 2.5 feet tall. A very big filter. It also has what I call misery multipliers inside of it, because beavers come in all sizes just to complicate things even more. And so the small beavers can go through the 6-inch mesh and cause trouble inside by putting interior walls in. It makes it a very difficult damming environment. So it's very sophisticated. There's a lot to consider. And if it ever does become a problem, as I told Bonnie, then you just build another square fence filter and just add it to that one. Just make the filter bigger, make the system more robust, and you will win. You can always defeat beavers, or at least I can.
That's why we hired you, Skip.
I know it. It's just, I just say that because just thousands and thousands of flow devices have failed, and they just never stood a chance from the beginning. Because as with my early flow devices, you just don't have a sense of that qualitative threshold that you have to surpass in order to have any chance. And so it's just if you do build a poor quality flow device, and it's not just a flow device, it's I make so many on-site decisions based on decades of experience and knowledge, and every site's different. But if you don't, then the whole investment will really be wasted, because it won't work. And the unfortunate thing about that is then oftentimes people draw the conclusion that flow devices can't work. They somehow decide that beavers are way too smart to ever fool, which is not the case. Our brains are 30 times larger. We can do this, people. It's just that we haven't done very good work, and we don't really understand what's required. And then if that happens, then you go right back to a cycle of cleaning and killing, endless cycle of killing, and as I keep noting over and over again, really badly damaging aquatic ecosystems.
So I'm going to point out in the background here, the lodge. It's in the top right corner of that picture. You can see where they've actually built right into the bank, and they're in this picture. This is, like I said, from just yesterday. There's been a significant difference even since you and I were there a couple weeks ago, Skip. They've continued to build onto that lodge.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so I think they're happy. I'm going to kind of pause us here for a moment to take a time check. We've got about 15 minutes left. Everybody that's listening, please think about those questions that you have, whether they are specific to this site or for Skip and his experiences, or for Plan, and start typing those into the chat box down below. There's a little bubble. It says chat. It might be lit up orange. Type in those questions as we go, and we'll circle back to them at the end.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Bonnie.
Oh, go ahead.
We only have 15 minutes. I should probably not go back to my slides, I think. I think
we have 15 minutes for the presentation left for you to go back to your slides, I think.
And then you'll have time after that for questions?
That's correct.
Okay, I don't need 15 minutes, but I want to make sure we have plenty of time for questions. Okay.
All right. So go ahead and share your screen with us again, Skip.
Yeah, I'll try. Oh, share screen. Wow, I could even figure that out. See, you see how I stumble and bumble through this. So if I can fool beavers, I think anybody can. So I just hit share, that little blue thing that says share, I guess.
You got it.
Yeah, see? Pretty clever guy. Oh, there's Bonnie again. Couldn't have done it without her. let's go on to the next slide. I hate to leave it, but here we, oops. Now, why isn't that going? It was not advancing. That's funny. Um, now all of a sudden it's not advancing.
You might try starting the slideshow again.
Maybe that, I guess that was it. I just hit an arrow there. Okay, yep. I think we're good now. Now this is another planned property where I've worked, and it's a bog meadow. And I also, as with, I didn't do this, but as with the previous Google Earth slide I showed you of Galway, I wanted to make the point that there's hardly any wetlands on the landscape. When you're in them or near them or battling beavers, it seems like, oh God, they're overpopulated. You hear that a lot. Oh, they're overrunning the landscape. But when you take a step back and get up high altitudinally, it's really not a big issue. And what does become clear is it's our own species that absolutely dominates the landscape and dominates everything. And so it's just, you know, one would hope that we'd feel a sense of responsibility to try to protect wetlands and, you know, the rare, important natural areas. And so that's what we're trying to do here at this site. And but that's why I always preach that, you know, try to not use flow devices if possible, you know, unless there's a real serious threat, as there was at Galway. But you always, I think your goal should always be to try to maximize your wetland values. Okay, next slide. There we go. I wanted to, you know, this, I've focused on this work for 25 years because I'm really into creating and improving wildlife habitats. And this is the best opportunity we have in society to make a dramatic difference. I mean, dramatic. And beavers do most of the work, so it's really inexpensive too, super inexpensive. I mean, just yesterday I was at a man-made wetland in New Hampshire. It looked pretty sterile to me. The beavers are getting into it, so it's going to get a lot better, right? But you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars for something that the beavers would do for free. I'm happy that the governments that are involved in creating those types of situations recognize the enormous value of wetlands. So there's no greater opportunity than to take ecological opportunity than to take measures to keep live beavers in ecosystems. But as it turns out, because it's so inefficient to battle beavers, I think as is the case with most wildlife species that are in conflict with humans, killing them typically ends in just endless cycles of inefficiency. And so it's important for us to try to think in a long-term manner. And that's what they've done, this group of people in Andover, New Hampshire. This is a road foreman, a conservation commissioner, and a selectman. And they decided that they were spending way too much money cleaning culverts by ramrodding them with log trucks, for example, and killing beavers and repairing damaged roads. And so they had me beaver-proof the whole town, which is only about 8 sites, which is pretty typical of a town, because beavers are restricted to such a tiny percentage of the landscape. You only have a handful of chronic conflict points, and you can eliminate those very quickly with high-quality flow devices, and then you immediately start accruing ecological and hydrological values and saving another form of green, money, lots of money. So these guys calculated that by making that switch, they would save roughly $500,000 over a 30-year period. So that's the kind of tremendous investment, economic investment that flow devices also represent. So It's just incredible, the double value you get with this strategy. If you can just get people to accept it, and just, it's just such a strong inclination for people in or much of society just to fear beavers and to eliminate them. So Beaver Deceivers, this is my logo. They really are the smart fix for conflicts. And I have a lot of fun with this cartoon. I always ask people to try to figure out what the author's name is on the book. So I'll give you a second with that. But if you're struggling with it at all, it's Harry Engineer, and beavers are definitely that. So that's the end of my presentation. I will also note that I have a lot of information on my website, which is beaverdeceivers.com. I'd be happy to help anybody, anywhere, anytime. I think it's a money well spent to get it right, and you can learn a lot about how to approach it. Like if you're a municipality, and to on a broader scale, and to eliminate it altogether. So thank you for your attention. And now,
Thank you, Skip.
yes,
That was fantastic.
thank
And
you.
your pictures are gorgeous. I don't know who your photographer is, but they're talented.
I just had to push a button.
Nature does the work, huh?
Yeah, you're darn right. The beavers do the work.
So we're going to start with a couple of questions here. And I'll admit I actually got us started off here because this is a question that I come across a lot in the field, and it actually came up at Galway. You know, we were working with the highway superintendent, the town supervisor, and multiple neighbors. And everybody has a different background and different experience. So they were confused about why, if we are a conservation organization, why we weren't concerned about the trees that the beavers were killing. You mentioned in your presentation that, you know, as the beavers are flooding larger areas and flooded wooded areas, you know, obviously those trees that can't tolerate wet roots are going to die off. So to those folks who understand that trees are a valuable part of our environment, and think therefore that perhaps beavers are having a negative impact on the environment, what do you say to that? How do you address that line of thinking when you come across that?
I'm going to address another one just briefly. I just wanted to say that if you want the Andover case study, you can get it through. I can get it to you, or I think Bonnie could as well. So beavers are a native species. They're occupying the same places now that they occupied for 10,000 years. So anything they do is natural. And natural is good. Natural is generally very good, because what it means is all native species evolved in that landscape. And we have a funny love affair with trees, but those trees are, in a sense, they were exotic species within those beaver flowages. And any palatable trees that grew, like in the long absence of beavers, that grew around the edges of these ancient flowages, did so because of this historical anomaly called the fur trade, an absolutely unnatural event that'll probably never happen again. And so it changed the natural native landscape. A lot of native species were greatly harmed, in the absence, when all those wetlands disappeared. And you think of all the aquatic sun-loving plants that would have just been snuffed out once they became overshaded by the trees. So what do I say? I have no concerns whatsoever.
Right.
Whatsoever. Everything beaver does is natural. They're slowly bringing back a tiny fraction of our landscape to its ancient form. It's all good. It's all good stuff. In
Absolutely.
addition, dead trees are amazing, like beaver lodges. They are amazing microhabitats. I love standing dead timber. Tremendous for bird perches and nesting sites for lots of wildlife. And they're beautiful. They're fascinating. Yeah, I just love it. I go around looking for places, wetlands that have been recently, and it's an ongoing process. Beavers are still today reflooding some of their ancient habitats for the first time. And I'd love to go to those places when it's just all dead timber, and it's just fascinating. And it's also fascinating from a historical standpoint, because it's symbolic of the arrival of Europeans on this continent 400 years ago. So it's really interesting. If you didn't put it in that perspective and understand that, as part of this historical anomaly called the fur trade, you might be alarmed. And unfortunately, even federal agencies, they will calculate the massive amount of timber loss from beavers, but it's just not fair, because those places never hosted timber before. And those are beaver habitats. They're supposed to be rich, open marshes.
Yeah.
And wait, one other thing, I'm sorry,
Oh, that's
Bonnie.
okay. Go ahead.
It's
And then we'll move on to a new question.
flow devices are incredibly technical. It's very hard to do them right, but anybody can protect a tree with a cylinder of wire. And so if you are a property owner who's concerned about the beavers chewing your trees, you don't have to protect every tree, but protect your favorites. But you have to get out there before the beavers.
Yeah.
And then, beavers have to eat too. You can't have beavers if you don't have beaver food. And if you don't have beavers, you're not going to have the wetlands. So there's a lot to be said for managing your property to try to grow some food to the beavers, or certainly to share some with the beavers.
Yeah.
But you can certainly get out there and protect your favorite trees. And just like flow devices, if you just kill the beavers to protect a tree, the next beaver that comes along is liable to kill that tree before you ever know. So a cylinder of steel will be there for decades. Steel mesh.
Yeah. Well, I want to actually, that brings us to one of the questions, the steel mesh. We have somebody wondering about the threat of contamination from the epoxy that we use, that was used on the filter. Has that come up in other scenarios? Have you ever addressed that?
Well, I've never heard it, and it's never crossed my mind as an issue.
As you go back and visit sites and monitor your work, have you ever seen any evidence of contaminated runoff?
No. I mean, it seems kind of permanent. It doesn't melt off or anything. It's just inert. So it just, I get the question more often, because when I build fences that are out of the water, I use pressure treated wood. So I also get that as a concern sometimes. But the typical, it's a very small amount. It's particularly a tiny amount that's in the water. And the thing about using wood that's not treated out of the water is that it decays rapidly.
Yeah.
And so then it becomes less economical to keep live beavers in the ecosystem, and people might be more inclined to kill them. I want to build flow devices that last and last and last, and require very little maintenance to make them, as economical as possible.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think many people don't realize that actually having the beavers there and having dams there is actually works as a filter for water, and so it actually helps improve our water quality. So it might be one of those trade-offs.
That's a great point. Yeah, and I've asked professors that have studied pressure treated. They have absolutely no concern, because the amount that's being used is so tiny. And
okay,
just quickly, I've also always seen it this way, that the ecological and environmental value of just making a flow device that lasts and works and keeping live beavers in the system is so enormous that,
Yeah.
that helps to balance those
Well,
minor concerns.
I'm with you there, Skip, but we have about 10 minutes left and I have quite a few questions. So I want to try to reach as many as we can.
I'll try to speak less.
We have someone wondering if you have specific pitches or recommendations for rural public works managers that are working outside of preserved lands. How can we help reach them if they want to kill beavers and take kind of the easier route or that mindset that they have? We recently had someone observe trapping happening, and the person that observed this, doesn't see a threat. It seems as though it's just being done as maintenance when there's no actual threat. And I guess we want to know how can we reach the hearts and minds of folks that are coming at this from a public work standpoint, and how can we help interject in that to make a difference outside of our own preserves?
Good question. It's very difficult. It's very difficult. I think that, the sort of the average person does not really appreciate wetland values. But in the average person, I suppose, much less like me on many issues, doesn't think in a very long-term manner. But if you can think in a long-term manner, you can you can start to save a great deal of money. It's more efficient. You're not constantly returning to the same conflict. You will save your municipality or your company or whatever it is, vast amounts of money over the coming years and decades.
Yeah. So approaching it economically might be the most motivating for municipalities.
But it's difficult. It's very difficult. But yeah.
Well, we'll just have to keep at it.
Yeah. And then
so, I have another question. Folks are wondering, how do we keep the pipe from clogging with debris? And also, what is the periodic maintenance required to keep it functioning properly? So I just want to point out that I think we had kind of a unique situation at Galway where the outflow pipe was heading downhill. Is that correct, Skip?
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about why that's helpful when it comes to clogging?
It's not really.
Oh, I thought, well, maybe I'm not wording it correctly. Yeah. Maybe you could go ahead.
The key to everything is just a big, sophisticated filter placed in the right way and in the right place, and not too close to the dam.
So on the outlet side of that, we don't have a filter. Is that because we didn't anticipate the beavers trying to work that far out of the creek and on that slope?
You typically don't have to do much on the downstream end. It's upstream end. It's much more of a challenge. So if it's a big enough filter, it doesn't get clogged. I mean, it's not going to get clogged just by natural. In most cases, I mean, every site's different, and sometimes you get big sediment dumps. Mm-hmm. But then you clean it and you make the filter bigger. But generally speaking, the maintenance is very, very low.
Mm-hmm. But definitely, it sounds like site specific. Each site is unique, and it might take a little tweaking to get the right spot.
Yeah. But the key is quality. If it's small and poorly designed, then it's going to require constant maintenance and probably not going to work for very long. Mm.
Well, I think those last two kind of wrapped it up, unless we have anybody else who wants to add anything else in. I want to, again, just thank folks for tuning in and learning a little bit more and sharing the interest with us. And again, thank everybody who has been able to, I'm getting another question, who's been able to help us out with the fundraiser to fund this particular baffle at Galway. We've had a fundraiser up on Facebook, and other people have been donating through the website, and we're really grateful for that, for the help. We're trying to close the rest of it and wrap that up. But if you have questions, or if you would like to get some more information or some more background, you can absolutely visit the website. You can reach out with more questions for Skip if you have them. And we're really eager to expand this knowledge. So hopefully you learned something new today and you can take it and share it with somebody else. So we've got folks thanking you, Skip, and for this presentation. And again, just go to saratogaplan.org and learn a little bit more. And thank you all so much. Skip, you are fantastic. Your presentation was wonderful. Thank you for making time in your weekend to do this for us all.
Yeah, thank you for all the good work you're doing.
It's
The plan's doing great work. Try, people, support the plan. Thanks.
We're going to try to, like I said at the beginning, we recorded this, and we're going to, if the video quality is sufficient, then we're going to try to share this with other folks as well. So.
And you know, people can feel free to call me if you have, you know, more questions, or write me.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right, everybody. Well, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Hopefully you get outside, and hopefully the snow stops at some point and the sun comes back out and we see spring reemerge. Be well and stay safe, everybody. Take care.